Hi, and welcome to Finding Your Way Through Therapy. The goal of this podcast is to demystify therapy, what can happen in therapy, and the wide array of conversations you can have in and about therapy. Through personal experiences, guests will talk about therapy, their experiences with it, and how psychology and therapy are present in many places in their lives. With lots of authenticity and a touch of humor, here is your host, Steve Bisson.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you so much. And welcome to episode 136 of Finding Your Way Through Therapy. If you haven't listened to 135 yet, please go back and listen to it because it is a very important conversation about anti-Semitism. Malka Shah talks about all these important things and then some. So please go back and listen to that. But episode 136 is returning from episode 108 and 122. So we'll call this Mental Men 3. Mental Men are Dennis Sweeney, Robert Cherney, Patrick Rice, and Andrew Kang. We had, again, a good time recording this. I'm recording post-interview, so taking away a little bit of the magic here, but I hope it makes sense. Again, Dennis Sweeney, Pat, Bob, and Andy all have their private practice. We've been on and off doing this for 20 years. I haven't been involved for 20 years, but this goes back to all the way back to Dennis and Pat doing it. So I hope you enjoyed the interview because I certainly enjoyed it. I like to immortalize these moments of people I truly, truly respect. So I hope you enjoyed the interview, and here it is. Well, hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 136. You recognize these faces, so if you're on YouTube, and go ahead and go check out my YouTube on Finding Your Way Through Therapy, you'll recognize these faces. And, they've been on episode 108. Episode 122, 136. I was doing the math before you guys all got on. There's a 14 episode symmetry going on here. So we cannot change that anymore because that's our luck. But I wanted to welcome everyone on the podcast, Andrew Kang, Pat Rice, Robert Cherney, and Dennis Sweeney. Guys, welcome back again to Finding Your Way Through Therapy. And everyone loves the name Mental Men, for the record.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Steve.
Great to be here.
For the few that missed the show, I mean, we went from like a 2-minute intro to a 1-minute intro, so you got 30 seconds this time to just quickly introduce yourself. By the time we're done in a few months, we're going to be down to 5 seconds. But let's start with Andrew. You came on first, so there you go. That's on you.
Okay. My name is Andy Kang. I'm a therapist in private practice, learning at the feet of these good gentlemen here, and just happy to be back to work here in January. So happy New Year, everyone.
You know, you're getting old when we talk about the holidays and what sickness there was running in the family and or you in the last month. But Andy, welcome. And Dennis, how about you go next?
So Dennis Sweeney, also a practicing clinician in private practice. Been doing this for over 40 years now. And speaking of being old, and it's nice to be here.
Welcome as usual. And as I've identified Dennis before as one of my main mentors, and all my bad habits have been learned from him. Bob, your turn.
I think most of us have had Dennis in our lives for a while. It's great. Hi, I'm Bob Cherney. I am a psychologist. I'm hitting the 40-year mark myself, and I'm in private practice as well as being the chief psychologist for a large mental health agency that is serving this Metro West Boston area. So happy New Year, everyone.
Well, I appreciate it, Bob, and I know you've worked at that agency for a long time because I got there, you were there, I left, you were still there, and you're still there now. So you're like a fixture among that agency. Pat,
23. Yeah.
Wow, 23 years. I thought I was like a lifer at 15, so I'm happy I ran. Pat Rice, not certainly you certainly last, but not least. Go ahead.
Well, it was beauty before age. So it was, even though I'm the elder statesperson here, I've been practicing about 35 years and met Bob and Dennis certainly as from my early training. Dennis was my trainer and Bob was his boss, and it was an extraordinary dynamic in which to learn and grow. And so I'm a private clinician as well. I do less work now, focused much more on spiritual growth and development and grief and loss than I was in the dual diagnosis practice I had for many, many years. But I used to do a lot of forensic work too, but I'm pretty much done with that. So it's just great to be a part of the Mental Men. I think we must be going on 25 years or something like that. So, but it's I always enjoy these revisits, and something about 14 must be a real lucky number. So, and I'm really grateful to be through 2023. It was a challenging year, and I'm very hopeful for this year on many dimensions. So, glad to be back.
We're all happy to be back since there's no golf going on right now in the Northeast.
That's right. Yeah.
This is the only way we're going to talk for a while, so maybe 14 has to be shorter just so that we can get back to our golf games. But one thing that you mentioned, Pat, is, you talked about how your career has evolved from, working in the mental health field to dual diagnosis to more of and forensics, and then going to more of a spiritual kind of practice at this point. We all have a style that we develop in time. And I was joking earlier because Dennis is a great mentor and taught me a whole lot. But, if we look at calmness and demeanor, me and Dennis are probably very much opposed in that way. But it's not a bad thing. I think I had to develop my style. Dennis has his style. But I want to start with you, Pat, since you brought it up. How do you define a style as a therapist? I mean, that's something that I find is interesting to define in general. I still struggle to this day.
I think that I define myself by going to all of the trainings that we have to go to for continuing ed. Is that when I see something, like the first time I did a motivational interview CEU study, I said, "Oh, that's what I do." I wasn't aware of these types of things in my early training. With Dennis, co-leading groups with him, he allowed me to blunder my way into learning. And he told me once that you're not going to learn anything from what you do intuitively well. You'll only learn from your mistakes, which is why I'm sitting in. And that was true. And so you use an error in judgment or naivete as a learning curve. And the goal is to not make that mistake twice. But as Dennis said earlier, before we got on, his style was a self-psychology style. Well, it was mine too, because I watched him work. Adopted a lot of his calm technique. He would remind me that I was not a calm individual, and I didn't resemble the person I am today in many ways because of my own life experience, whatever, from which I had to heal. And he was the one that told me, he said, "I don't know what it is," he said, "but somewhere in your past there was a huge narcissistic injury." And it was accurate. And that's the first time that's the first time I had a label for it. I knew what it felt like. And suddenly it also allowed, you're talking about your book, Steve, but that allowed me to not pathologize myself and see it as a condition that needed to be dealt with and learned from before I could help other people with the same condition. As Dennis said, Pat, your biggest fault right now is that you are overly identified with patients. And that's a blind spot. And you're going to have to learn how to do that. And I watched him work and I watched others work. I had a wonderful therapist myself for 15 years who I stole everything from these people, as I still do. One last thing is I've always been connected to a collegial network. In the whole 35 years, it started at the old Lenamore Start Out program, which was a terrific learning module with study groups and all kinds of in-house CEU type things and seminars. But as we go on, I've the first time we all got together in Dennis's office for the first Mental Men, and I started when Andy and Mark and others were in there. I'm going, geez, these people really know stuff, even though they were younger and mentees of mine. I'm always amazed at how much I learned from the people that I have mentored in a way. So there's an old adage that I stole from a veterinarian on television that said, "I've never met a clinician I couldn't teach something to or learn something from." And that's why I've told every student, stay close to these collegial networks, because it's a remarkably complex thing, the human condition. And we have our own perspectives on it and blind spots, but as a whole entity, as a mental men group, whether it is a formal thing like this or a walk on a golf course, which is 20 minutes of golf and a whole bunch of conversation, it's an opportunity to never feel like I'm alone. And as I do now, I'm more into a life process of helping people ascend in their own consciousness and grieve. As my greatest mentor, probably, which was our friend Dick Fleck, a chaplain and a Dominican and an extraordinary person, a wonderful clinician. I see Dennis's face and Bob's face and Dick's face when I am in my own countenance, especially on Zoom, because I get to see myself. And there are times when I go, geez, I look just like Dennis. So then here I am, wasn't I? But so we steal all our good stuff. And as Dick told me, that if you steal from everybody, it's research, not plagiarism. And if you're stealing simply and I'll say one thing, when I first left my internship, I was working as a coordinator in a public detox. And Bob and Dennis allowed me to basically take everything I wanted to from the paradigm of the start out high-end short-term addiction treatment program and implement it in the public detox, because it's all about helping people. And so I probably started out theoretically as a humanist, then went into self-psychology as a paradigm for doing psychotherapy. And I'm getting back into the kind of humanitarian type of approach to things. We're all in this together. And if we don't help each other, we're pretty much lost. So
I steal from you all the time, Pat. One of my favorite sayings when clients tell me, wow, that's brilliant. I'm like, ultimately, just remember, one of my colleagues said, there's only 3 original ideas in the world. We just keep on recycling them in different names. And my clients always relate to that. They're like, that simplifies the world. And I'm like, I think that's the job, right? Of sometimes of what we do and just simplifying the world. But I quote you, and I do name you sometimes. And some people are like, is he famous? I'm like, well, he's famous in my circle.
not Hadley, as they'd say in Maine.
But I wanted to add, like, since you mentioned Dennis and talking about self-psychology, not that I'm just skipping around here. But I wanted to go to Dennis and ask him about that stuff.
Well, self-psychology is it's a school of thought that was first developed by a psychiatrist by the name of Heinz Kohut. Unfortunately, if you sort of listen to some of his devotees, they complicate the heck out of it. So I've tried to, I remember going to a conference. Bob, you and I and Arthur went to this conference years and years ago where we were listening to people talk about Kohut's papers. And Arthur leaned over and said, if I buy breakfast, can we leave now?
Yep.
And to simplify it, Kohut talks about the importance of relationship and the importance of how we reflect to one another, and sort of I think the core element to any good therapy. And Steve, part of your drive here is to help people to understand how to find their way through therapy. And that, to me, the core element is in the relationship, always in the relationship. And I don't care what your style is, it comes down to that relationship that you have with somebody, and somebody has with you, because it is a mutual thing. It's not just about one person or the other. It's both. But Kohut identifies that we go through different stages throughout life, and we repeat those stages over different periods of time. And he talks about the first stage being the stage of reflection, and he identifies that as sort of the gleam in your mother's eye, and that the first place that we get a sense of who we are as to whether we're good or bad is in that sense of that caretaker who's looking down on us, and the reflection that comes back to us. as an aside, and I'm thankfully, again, for the fourth time, I'm a new grandparent. And I have this theory that one of the most important developmental experiences for any of us is when our diapers are being changed. And that if our diaper is being changed and somebody is looking at us with this sour face and smelling and not, being happy about what's happening, well, that's a reflection of what's coming from us. I'm giving you this, and this is your reaction. And so I'm always very careful when I'm changing a diaper for a grandchild, that I'm always very positive in how I'm looking back, no matter what it smells like or looks like. So that's the first stage. So we get a sense of who we are. We get a sense of ourself by that reflection from other people. The second stage is a stage of idealization, and that we find somebody that is really good, people that we idealize, and we identify, geez, this is that person's got something that I want. I want to be like that person. And then we sort of get our sense of who we are from that and that identification. Then we move into another stage where it's a peer stage where, geez, I like the people that I'm with. I like the people who are around me, and I'm pretty good because of that. And that's where we get our sense of self. And then we eventually evolve into a sense of, I guess I'm pretty good because I'm me, and I feel comfortable with who I am. And those stages evolve over different times in our lives. It happens when we're infants. It happens when we're adolescents. It happens when we first become professionals. One of my primary focuses of work has been, change this now to recovery and addiction versus addiction and recovery, because it's recovery first. And you work to try and help people to identify with their recovery, not their addiction. So when you think about that, the core elements of the 12-step program and the way it actually works, it reflects all of those things. People come into program, geez, isn't it wonderful that you're here? You look for a sponsor. That person's got something that I want. Then you join a group, and then, boy, I'm in recovery. I'm really working this, and this is good, and I can help other people. So it's reflected there. It's reflected in middle age. I'm learning now. It's reflected in older age, where we're all, sort of learning to work through different things, and we get that reflection. We get that sense of, geez, I want to be like that person. I like the people we're with, and I'm okay. I'm going to get through this. This is going to be good. So that's sort of the core element of my way of engaging people when I work with them.
Well, certainly style that I definitely took on, and that's something that I think, looking at everyone nodding on here, and I hope you go to the YouTube video, I think a lot of people really related to it. That's essentially what I tell people, is that, what type of therapy works the best? It's a therapeutic alliance, because it does not matter how good you are at IBF or CBT or DBT or self-psychology or spirituality. If you don't have a good strength of relationship with your therapist, what's the point? And I think that that's something that I talk about a lot, and you are truly an inspiration for me on that. And I remember you saying, you're the first person who ever told me, if someone leaves, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. And I used to think that was like a failure on my part. And you may not remember you said this to me, Dennis, but I do. And that's why, among many other reasons, why I say that you're a mentor to me. Bob, you're next, because, we need a psychologist. I mean, none of us are psychologists except you. So we need a psychologist's point of view, and then we'll go to a lawyer point of view.
Andy, you'll have to tell your background. Dennis, that was well said. Really nice encapsulation there. That whole idea of like lived experience and how it impacts us, one of the things I tell a lot of people that I teach, and the relationship is the core healing element of this whole thing. And trying to develop that and sustain that is crucial. And a lot of the stuff that I do in the community mental health system is see people who they did not get the reflection or the idealization or have a chance to, look around and see their peer group as something that's supportive or feeling comfortable with yourself. A lot of that, those basic tenets that you talked about, depending on how organized your life is and the people that are in your life, especially early on, the changing diapers is it's an interesting kind of process. And I do believe that that's something that we absorb as infants and as young children. And, how am I being not only perceived, but reacted to? And one of the things I learned in my own therapy was if your family has issues and there are difficulties or there's things such as depression or anxiety or addiction in the family, some of that stuff gets kind of pushed aside because the family is working toward getting through and doing the best they can rather than paying a deep attention to what the children are needing. And that really helped me to understand that better, because I've had some lived experience myself with this. And in order to get to those stages, in order to give it away, you have to either find it somewhere in your own family of origin, or you have to find it in a healing relationship like therapy. And I was fortunate enough to get that. And the one of the biggest things that I learned was, or at least one of the things was the grief work that needs to be done in order to move past this. You start to realize what you didn't get over time. And then you can either decide, well, I'm going to be angry, resentful, and bitter and pass it down, or I'm going to work at it and provide it either through someone else in a decent, loving relationship, or I'm going to, figure out a way to do it through therapy or whatever we do. We have to figure out a way to either heal ourselves or pass it down in a way that's negative. And I just made a choice. And I really, Dennis, I think a lot of us got into the field to some extent because we were trying to at first figure out some of the things that we needed to. And then later on, what I realized is we could use those things to help others. And so in a lot of ways, that's what I've done. And the lived experience, though, I think it's fascinating how it can, for me, self-psychology and attachment theory have become central to my work. And I really love attachment theory, and how that explains a lot of the way we react and how we cope in ways that are necessary initially while we're growing up, and then later on those survival skills become impediments because things like trust becomes a big issue when you don't feel like you're being reflected on or idealized or held in esteem by people that are supposed to love you. So there's a lot of things here, but I think if we can figure it out early enough, or at least do the work that we need to, we can give it to other people. And the more I found the more you give away, that, you got to give it away to keep it, as they say. So I've been fortunate in that sense.
I've come to believe in terms of attachment, in that sort of kind of a watchword for me is attached to very little, connect to everything.
In the world of therapy, the power of connection and understanding is undeniable. That's where the peer network steps in, offering a bridge of support that complements your clinical expertise. Imagine a service where certified peer support specialists, through telehealth, extend your reach, offering clients continuous, compassionate care. This is what the peer network provides. Our peer support specialists are not just trained, they're experienced. They've walked through the path of recovery and resilience. They speak the language of empathy and understanding, essential in mental health and addictive recovery journeys. As a clinician, your goal is to see your clients thrive. The Peer Network enhances this journey, offering a layer of support that's accessible, reliable, and deeply human. Join us in this mission of comprehensive care. Incorporate the Peer Network into your practice today and witness the transformative power of peer support in mental health. Visit thepeernetwork.com. Together, let's create a world where everyone feels supported, understood, and connected.
Sounds Buddhist. Yeah.
Yeah, the Buddha said that all suffering is in attachment and desire, and it's
the second precept of the Four Noble Truths.
Yeah.
Yes,
it's letting go. Is that we help people to let things go, especially their past. The most profound thing I ever heard in a recovery context was on the being in the moment. Is that if you're going back in time, you're going to feel conflict and regret, and it's if you go forward in your mind, you're going to feel fear and conflict. And the only place that we can achieve peace of mind is in the present moment, which is in Buddhist lore, that is what is the only thing that is real. And this aged guy, I don't know, 1990 in Bar Harbor, 50 years sober, by the name of Homer, said that I haven't learned much. He said, but I've learned that if I can keep my head where my feet are, that's the only place that the higher power walks with me. It's the only place I am at peace because I'm not alone. And I'll fast forward maybe 5 years after that, when I was in a very rigorous meditation discipline called Siddha Yoga at the time, which is of Hindu origin in its practices. And the guru, who was an enlightened being, I remember she said, not in relationship to addiction recovery, but in general, everyone is recovering from something. Your past, the environment, war, whatever it is. She said something that I never forgot because I wrote it down. And she said that in all recoveries, a community of recovering peers is essential. And that's what Dennis was speaking to, is what we are taught, that, social psychology, people live in groups, and we get isolated by hurt, by loneliness and all of that. And that's a rut that we can furnish, and just that isolation. And I spent a lot of time working, educating folks as to the difference between solitude and isolation. It's very different. And if you are empathic in nature, solitude is often the way, a means by which to recharge your battery, so you can be of service and use to others. So I didn't mean to usurp your slot, Andy. So forgive me.
Well, we have no time for Andy. Good night, everyone. No, I'm kidding. No, I just wanted to share a couple of things. The spiritual side is something that I've always found very interesting. And, Pat, I thought about the gift that Dennis gave me. The gift you've given me is the fact that I bring up spirituality more and more in my practice when it's appropriate, of course, and how it's important for a complete self. And I wanted to share another story about Bob, because one of my first staff meetings at Advocates, sorry to bring the name up, but in Marlboro, I was sitting in a supervision, a group supervision. Mr. Bob is running it, and I don't really know Bob, and I can't remember what came up, but it was something that was fairly complex as a story. And I looked at the leader of our group, of all 20 or so community members, say, I honestly don't know. Does anybody know? And the humility and the knowledge that came from that was so amazing. And I wanted to tell you about the gift you gave me, Bob. And I really thank you for that. But I remember that moment. You may not remember that moment. I don't remember what we were even talking about, but it was really striking how quickly you said, I don't know. Does anybody know here? And that really taught me that I don't need to know everything in order to be who I am or whatever I do as work. And I really appreciate that. And attachment style, I have a whole lot to say about that. But how about we give a chance to the lawyer turned therapist turned actor eventually, I'm sure. But we didn't want to usurp you by any means, Andy. But definitely want to hear more about your style and how you perceive all that. I'm sure that, being the last one in line is always a little rough, but
There's so many things to pick up on, and I won't be able to do it all. I will say my diaper game is pretty tight. Yeah, like I've got 4 kids, all pretty much into adulthood. So I've changed a lot of diapers and got really, really good at it so fast. Anyway, yeah, I find myself saying I don't know a lot more now. The longer I do it, the more I say it, and I find that it's actually a really useful tool because you're modeling something that everybody's familiar with, but nobody wants to admit. It's almost a sacrilege to admit that you don't know something in this day and age. So, but of course, nobody knows anything when it comes right down to it. If we're talking about Buddhism, if we're talking about attachment, we don't. All of this stuff was formed so early that what do we really know about it? And how do we relate to it on an intellectual level versus a real emotional core level? That's a lot of what we're doing with people, is trying to dig into that a little bit and help them describe it, help them put words on it. I think that's where the kind of styles come in, and things can be described in a way that's acceptable and palatable to people, which is why when their family is pointing out the same exact thing to them, they're rejecting it immediately. But if I say it, somehow that makes a difference, and so when I think of style, I definitely have my spiel about what my approach is and my theoretical stance on things. But I think my style is more about, Dennis, what you were talking about connecting. Like, how do I connect with someone? And for me to try to describe that is very difficult because I'm missing the other half of the connection in the abstract, right? That connection becomes real when you're with the person, So I'm connected to you guys on this call right now, regardless of whether I'm speaking or not, and I'm taking on information and stuff, and I'm trying to think about how I'm going to feed that back in a useful way. That's if more than anything, I would say my style is to try to be attentive, to try to be in the moment, as Pat was saying. Future and past, my little pithy saying for that is time travel. You're time traveling, and describing that and putting such a simple label on something that everybody experiences and that everybody has a hard time describing when they're doing it, or acknowledging, or even being aware of. Like, people don't know they're stuck in the past a lot of the times as they're grinding on something that happened. They don't know they're stuck in the future if they're worried about something that's coming up. They still think they're in the moment. They still think they're doing the thing they need to be doing, whether that's in the past or the future. But of course, we all know and can recognize quickly that, oh, that's not productive. That's making things harder for you. So the connection, the style is, for me, how do I get that out there so that it can be ingested, so that it can be like actually used and metabolized by this person helpfully. And there's some cauldron magic to that, I think, also. And that's the styles that I've picked up from you guys. Is it's the little things, or it's the approaches, it's the idea that comes out at a random time, and I'm like, I'm going to use that. I'm definitely going to use that. We're out on the course, and Pat says something like, "Oh, look at this grass. I could just walk on here barefoot." That sets off all kinds of ideas in my head, and I'm talking to people about that the next day. Like invariably, I'm using that stuff. So I know that's not really an answer about style so much as just I think it's my approach to things, and I'm trying to just get that connection. I'm just trying to and see what this person really needs from me in that moment. So I'm not time traveling also. I can't be worried about how I'm performing, but it's useful to just have all of these touchstones for style.
I think it's not a semantics work here. We're trying to figure out a lot of stuff ourselves. That's the good thing about this group. The other thing that I want to mention, Andy, is that, what you brought to me is you taught me to shut the hell up. And what I mean by that is I can be a big personality, obviously, as some of you may know. And I've seen you just sit there and listen and listen and listen so many times with us. And I'm like, I gotta learn how to do that. And ever since, this is years ago, you may not even, again, I like these little tidbits that I picked up on all of you, you highly likely don't remember. But that's what I've learned from you, and to learn to shut the hell up and listen. And while Dennis is a strong silent type too, but I think, Andy, I really picked it up from you in particular. And I want to mention that too.
Thanks. It's interesting that you say that because I actually have to think more about talking more. Sometimes I'm actually stuck in my head having this whole meta conversation with myself. Just looks like I'm being thoughtful and pensive. You know, I I've got something else going on, so I got to remember. Oh wait, is this this? I need to jump in here
Get a
and
beard.
really
You can
hang
stroke
close.
it, and people think you're really thinking hard.
Oh, that's a good idea. That's
That's
a good idea.
as you were talking, Andy. I was trying to synthesize it. Dennis tries to reduce things often to simple. And when I first started studying psychology, I think I went to graduate school to figure out how a really smart guy like me could end up so screwed up. And then it became a real intellectual feast. I was rekindling my intellectual processes, and it's easy when you start to study the analysts, the psychoanalytic schools, and all of that, to get into the intellectual pursuit of psychotherapy. And I've evolved to the point where survival is emotional survival and spiritual survival is a really remarkable thing. And I remember my old mentor, Dick, always saying, the chaplain, talking about most people stay alive by what he called virtual prayer, where your heart is talking to the divine and asking for assistance when your head is so distracted it can't. And when I'm talking about helping people, what I've learned is that the mind is where fear, doubt, and insecurity live. And the mind judges me, it judges the world, it judges things I don't understand, makes those types of labels. But the heart, and my whole philosophy now is not thinking, but hearting, getting into the heart sense, is that's where love is. And relationship is about trust and love. And we learned that they're independent. I can love somebody, but if I can't trust them, the relationship is flawed at best. And so, but it's predicated upon me being useful to anybody else. Is I must learn to trust myself and to love myself, and let go of the things, the mistakes of the past, and all of that. So I'm much more into heart psychology rather than head psychology, as odd as that may sound, which is kind of more the self-psychology and self-help programs are about, as Dick had once said, that we don't talk about self-uality, we talk about spirituality, but spirit is and self are the same thing, and that my spirituality is equated in the relationship I have with me. How do I feel about me? Because if that's not in a positive state, I'm not very helpful to anybody else, I don't think, because I get into the judgment and not into the more of the, for lack of a an intellectual word or a psychological word, the love of this person. Do you love your patients? Well, in that agape love, that natural human love, we hope we can, even when they are remarkably flawed. Because when Dennis talks about the pejorative affect you can give someone when you're changing their diaper and basically make a down payment on a therapist's Lexus in the future, if I've had people early in my career that told me stunning things, and that I had to make sure that I was doing one thing that I was taught well by Dennis and Bob, is to not show any pejorative response to that. And that's when I would channel somebody else's countenance. And that's when the heart was taking over, and I was trying to relate to them as a human being and not as this constellation of symptoms or history or anything like that. And you do that in that silent process, but I try to get out of up here because, as you all know, that's a very busy place, and get down into the quiet. And for the golf purists out there, the grass to which I was referring was velvet bent. When you see it on a fairway, it is really special.
As you talk about that, Pat, I think of one of the biggest I don't know areas for me these days is the idea of there's the heart and the mind, and then there's the brain. And I think that the heart and the mind are, and again, this is where I don't know, but I wonder more and more about it. It's the heart and the mind that teaches us how to train our brain, because when you come right down to it, it's that function that that causes our day-to-day experience. But boy, I don't know.
But Dennis, that's where the field's going. I mean, it's one of the things we have over at Advocates is transcranial magnetic stimulation. Now, that's a direct brain intervention. It's fascinating. And we're just now getting to the point where I think we're going to be interacting and impacting the brain in ways that are going to be therapeutic, but it's trial and error, whether or not it's psilocybin or, whether or not it's, hypnosis, whether, they're EMDR. These are all things that we don't quite understand, even though some of them work. So, but, you mentioned not knowing. One of the things as I teach is that I find with younger clinicians is that they come out of graduate school almost expecting to know everything, and it's impossible. And one of the things you learn over time is that the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. And it's wonderful, but you have to accept that. And, some of it has to do with self-compassion, and that comes after a lot of self-discipline and things for me, it's meditation, but it's also learning that it's okay to be humble and curious. And that's where I think you're able to say, geez, anybody got some ideas about this? And I'm always struck when I've got a Zoom supervision of 30 or 40 people in there, and I say, anybody got any ideas? And all of a sudden 3 or 4 people pop up, and it's just, it's magic. I mean, I think Andy used that word cauldron magic or something. It seems like when people are together, they're waiting. And sometimes I just watch the screen and I look for people doing this, or, and I jump on it. I say, Shirley, you just scrunched your face up. What do you got on your mind? And it's fun. I really enjoy it, but I really think being humble and curious, and the older I get, the more I am that. I think it's not knowing is an okay place to be. I had to learn that. I think most of us do. And so now it's a lot easier to I think to be, there are no wrong questions except the ones that you are too afraid to ask.
I think we all have that here, Bob. It's like you networking computers or something. You magnifying the power. I feel that every time we get on the phone together. I feel that when we're together, either in the same room or even virtually, just I can feel the synapses firing in a different way. And speaking of mind and body, to me, it's all body. Like the brain's part of the body. It's not some disembodied thing or some separate thing. It's all integrated in there. And you better be paying attention to all of it. But yeah, my brain works a lot better in the presence of other good brains.
I think another piece to that magic cauldron, and I'll positively reframe a little bit the idea of not knowing or knowing that you don't know everything, is being open. And that one of the hopeful things for me about self-psychology is that as we go through each one of those phases where you go through the different stages of the process, is that if you're open to it, you have a chance to pick up something that you didn't get earlier on. So as life goes on, we get more filled. We can, if we're open to it, there's more that can get in that didn't get in before.
But well said. I'm going to just say that I believe that we're embarking now on this new year with where the field will go when I'm long gone and all of that, but we're rapidly ascending in that, which is, I started out my education in physics, so I was going to be a astrophysicist, and but when you're talking about transcranial magnetic stimulation and all of that, and all the magnetic therapies and the others, we're talking about a quantum reality. There's a quantum healing, and I believe this is where we're going. When we're treating an organ, the brain often, of which we know very little, maybe 15-20% max of understanding the central nervous system. But we do know that everything in the universe is a quantum. Everything affects everything. We see evidence of that, shadows of that. But I have great hope that we're about to embark upon a real new understanding of all of it, as this whole consciousness and ascends, and we start to learn a little bit more about what we're treating. All too often in my practice, in psychiatry, it's literally you see them treating symptoms, not the conditions. And my wife's going through something where they're studying DNA, and which was her original thing, studying RNA and all of that stuff. She speaks of things I don't understand, but it's about getting to the core of it. And I have great hope, as I've told every student I ever had, every lecture I ever gave with any of these classes, is I'm really excited for you, because you're going to actually start to treat what's going on in a much more integrative way. Whereas my span of career had been more about treating symptoms. Now that's why I like where I'm going now, and is that it's treating more of the entire condition in the organism and the whole. The body is amazing, but it is a vehicle. It carries this other thing around, which is what is the energy that we all really are, because everything in the universe is energy. So I'm really excited about it. That's what gets me. I come into this and I get all stoked. I'll be stoked for the rest of the day, because we've had this synergy of mind and people I deeply respect and trust and value and need in my life. Or I'm half of what, or less of what I can be for other people without this connection, fellas. So again, it's an honor and a privilege to know all of you.
Well, I got to tell you on this note, we've talked for 40 minutes. One of the things I've learned through my career as podcasters, that a 40 to 45 minute group works perfectly for people listening to podcasts. Anything above that, people lose interest, and a little lower than that, it's not long enough. So I've learned a few things. The other thing that I want to leave on is this too. You talked about all these new things. Let's not forget about the gut biome and how this will probably also transform what we do in mental health. Probably from my tail end of my career, I've already started anyway talking about it with different people, because I've seen one of my best friends in the world, Helen, shout out, change her diet and go from being on 3 or 4 medications to just about one, and that she barely takes, and in a good way, and help really work on her mental health in particular. So there's, between the brain and the gut biome, I think the future is very exciting, very bright, very intellectually stimulating. And we already all have our style, so we're not going to change. We're just going to keep it the same. That's just how we are. But the point is, I think that the message I hope everyone gets from this podcast is that no matter how long or how little you've been in this field, you can learn, you can offer stuff, and what you know fits in a thimble, and you just don't know it when you're younger. But as you grow older, it really is the case. Guys, I thank you so much. So in 14 episodes, we will get back together again. You know, Andy, Bob, Pat, Dennis. I wish I had a nickname for you, but I don't have one. Thank you. And I will see you guys on the golf course before our episode, hopefully. Well, that concludes episode 136. Dennis Sweeney, Andrew Kang, Patrick Rice, and Robert Cherney. Thank you so much for being part of the Mental Men. Great conversation again. But episode 137 will be with a new guest that we've never had before, and I'm looking forward to meeting her. Her name is Amita Sharma, and she's going to talk about different things, including Nourishdoc, which I'm hoping that you guys really enjoy, and I hope to see you then.
Please like, subscribe, and follow this podcast on your favorite platform. A glowing review is always helpful. And as a reminder, this podcast is for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only. If you're struggling with a mental health or substance abuse issue, please reach out to a professional counselor for consultation. If you are in a mental health crisis, call 988 for assistance. This number is available in the United States.